Welcome to Hope Channel International. As Adventists, we firmly believe that our health is important and that we should take care of our bodies. In this video, learn more from Dr. Nerida about the role of fats in our food and what we can do to have a balanced diet.
Now, I want to give you a little demonstration this afternoon. I want to talk about fat. Fat is yummy, right? We all like a little fat in our food. And most of the fat in our foods, well, our fats are either polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, or saturated. And so if you look at this molecule, you'll see a double bond. That means it's unsaturated, mono or poly, whereas if there's no double bond, then it's a saturated fat. And it really makes a difference to health. And I will use my slides now if I can. You know, saturated fat does things that almost the opposite of what the other fats do. It elevates cholesterol. Polyunsaturated fats will lower cholesterol, but saturated fats will elevate cholesterol. It will make us resistant to our own insulin, and that promotes diabetes. It causes oxidation. That's what ages us. Inflammation, we all know what that does. Pain, tissue breakdown. And then it puts fat in the wrong places. In our organs, for example, fat in the liver causes liver failure, fat in the kidneys, in the heart, and in the muscles. When it lays down in the muscles, diabetes. And so that's why meat is one of the strongest associations, meat eating, to type 2 diabetes. So it also alters gene expression. So at the cellular, subcellular level, there are genes being switched off so that key enzyme pathways no longer function. And then it promotes, of course, with all of that, progression of disease, the big one being our number one killer, heart disease, atherosclerosis, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, metabolic diseases, inflammatory diseases, degenerative diseases, autoimmune diseases, even just allergies and cancer. So the whole spectrum. Now, we need to, if you look at every dietary body around the world and their recommendations, whether it's WHO, American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, whatever organization, the Institute of Medicine, they all say reduce your saturated fat intake as much as possible. They used to say less than 10% of your calories. Now they're saying less than 7%, even lower, just as low as you can get it. So we need to know where we get saturated fat from in our diet. And I'll give you a clue. It's in meat. It's also in eggs, and it's in dairy. And I need to also warn you, there are some plant products. So for those of you that are vegetarian or even vegan, you've put away even the eggs, you still need to be careful with your diet to find out where am I getting saturated fat from. And so what I want to show you now is a chart that shows us the fatty acid composition. So how much of these different molecules are in the fats that we eat. And if we start at the top, we can see that avocado oil, 71% of the fat in an avocado is monounsaturated. This is good. We need some fat in our diets. It helps us to feel full. It helps us to absorb some of our vitamins. It makes us a little cuddly. And so we need some fat there on our bones. So avocados, great way to get it. Olive oil, 77% of olives, of fat from olives is monounsaturated. Canola oil is also good, 61% monounsaturated, 32% polyunsaturated, of which a good proportion are omega-3 fats. So that's a good thing. And so canola oil got the bad rap for so many years. But if you can find organic canola oil, so you know it's not genetically modified, I would say that's a really good cooking oil to use. And then flaxseed, we don't cook with flaxseed, but of course flaxseed, only 15% monounsaturated, but 78% polyunsaturated, and those are omega-3. 75% of that, 78% is omega-3 fat. So that's a really good source of omega-3 fats. Very little saturated fat in those oils that I've mentioned. Just a standard bottle of vegetable oil in the store, that might be sunflower, safflower, corn oil, soy oil, primarily polyunsaturated, but unfortunately omega-6. And omega-6 fats will promote inflammation. So if we compare that to, say, the fat that we would find in the beef, so beef lard was a very common fat used some time ago, 44% mono and 40% saturated. So you can now compare. So let's look at some of and butter is very similar. If you drop down a couple of lines, butter 30% mono, 4% poly, and 66% saturated. So it's almost worse than the beef lard. But if we go up a line, palm oil, 40% mono, 50% saturated. And then if you look, just stay in the saturated line, palm kernel oil, 83% saturated fat, and coconut oil, 92% of the fat in coconut oil, which it's primarily just fat, is saturated fat. And some people would argue, oh, but it's medium chain saturated fats. Well, actually only 15% of that 92% is medium chain. The rest are long chain saturated fats, just like this or this. All right. And so how did coconut oil come to be touted as a health food? This doesn't seem right, right? So we're going to have a little history lesson. Once upon a time, we used butter and lard. And it was used in cooking and frying and baking, and it worked really well. The cookies came out nice and brown and firm, and the deep frying all turned out really nice. It tasted good. It had a good texture, a good color, and it withstood heat. It didn't go rancid in that heat. But then in the 1960s, we learned that these saturated fats were not just hard on the table. You notice butter and cheese, and when you cook a steak, the fat goes hard. Hard on the table. I say if it's hard on the table, it's hard on the heart. And so we learned it was hard on the heart, and so we thought, oh, we're going to have to go to polyunsaturated fats. But the problem is, how do you spread oil on your toast in the morning? Or how do you make those cookies nice and firm? And so we had a problem. And the food industry quickly came to our rescue, and they took these saturated fats and they said, don't worry, we can chemically alter these and we can just attach some hydrogens and we'll call them hydrogenated. And so was born the hydrogenated fat, partially hydrogenated fat. We shortened it to trans fats, which is a biochemical word. And so they cured the problem for us and they gave us margarine. Who remembers margarine coming into the stores? Yes, I was a kid, and I'd heard that butter was bad. Mummy, I'm not having any more butter. And then margarine came on. Yay, I can just spread the margarine on, right? I think we all did that because somehow we thought that because we'd moved away from saturated fats, we were moving to something that was healthy, not knowing that hydrogenated fats were even worse. These chemically altered ones. Isn't it funny how man messes with what God made and just makes it a whole lot worse? But I guess it's not funny. It's just normal. And we jumped out of the frying pan into the deep fat fryer, didn't we? Because now we had these, and we didn't find out about the harm of hydrogenated fats till about late 90s. So for 30 years, we ate these, for 30 years, we ate these hydrogenated fats at will. And, it would have been much more sensible if we'd said, oh, we should take away the eggs and bacon for breakfast. We should perhaps have oatmeal. And instead of cheese in our sandwiches, perhaps some hummus or cottage cheese, right? No, we had to keep eating what we'd always eaten, right? And so in the early 2000s, it was actually food activists, not the food industry, not the health industry. It were food activists that said ban trans fats. And it took a little while to get that ball rolling. But yay, 2018, trans fats have now been banned here in America. That took a while, didn't it? But we couldn't go back to the butter and lard because we knew about the dangers of saturated fat, and we knew about the hydrogenated fats now. So what were we to do? Well, there was a perfect, it was almost too good to be true, this perfect option. It was plant-based, it was cholesterol-free, and it was just sitting there looking at us. The tropical fats, the palm oil, the palm kernel oil, and the coconut oil. Solid at room temperature. Look at that. Solid. Perfect for those cookies. And it sounded so good. And so the coconut industry was born. And it was called the miracle food, 101 benefits of coconut. These foodies just took it and ran with it. And we have got the same problem all over again because we've still got saturated fats. And the way it took off really was that there were very few studies, scientific studies, that looked at the dangers of coconut oil. It was just looking at saturated fat in general, not specifically coconut. Though as it sort of came into massive use, there were about 5 studies that really existed, and all confirming the same effects as the saturated fats, the elevation in cholesterol and inflammation and all of these things. So, in fact, one study found that heart disease deaths in Singapore was 3 times higher than that in Hong Kong, and in Singapore they used palm oil a lot more, palm oil and coconut oil a lot more than they did in Hong Kong. So there was this relationship. And then if we think about coconut oil, it's very concentrated food. It takes about 10 coconuts to make 1 quart of coconut oil. So when you think about what's happened with coconuts, there are now huge plantations, and we use the fat for the coconut fat, which is fine, but we've got all these byproducts, and so a whole industry has been born out of this coconut takeoff, like the coconut sugar, coconut water, coconut yogurt, all these different milk. We've always had coconut milk too, but all of these different byproducts, which, by the way, I guess the milk has, and the milk and the cream have the fat in, but these other products don't. But we have a whole industry there, and it's going to be hard to change that habit of eating coconut oil. But I think it's good to know that there are problems with it.